Jared, I'll kick this off to you. How did this evolve that we really had a food focus?
Well, again, back to kind of why I got into slow money, which kind of got us into starting AFI, was I saw small scale agriculture and food being the driver in rural parts of America. So once you get out of the city centers, the main drivers are very small businesses and oftentimes agriculture. So my initial interest in these more rural areas led me to identify food and agriculture as a very important economic driver, and that was how I saw some part of the revitalization of these rural towns is going to have to be tied to food, in my opinion. I like to joke that not every small town in America is going to get a Home Depot data center or a Tesla gigafactory. So to sit around and wait for those things in a traditional chamber of commerce kind of way to try to bring outside commerce in. I think it is a more realistic way to approach the issue by looking at what do we have around us that we can utilize. And in these rural parts of America, what they have around them is a lot of agricultural land and a lot of agricultural history and a lot of agricultural knowledge. So those small farms seem to be a good spot to be the base for how to go drive this revitalization and this strengthening of these local economies. So how about you? Why'd you end up interested in it?
Well, I think there are kind of multiple layers to the answer. When we think about impact investing or helping support and build communities or revitalize them, every community, every person, every family is touched by food, and you can trace that from the AFI perspective of investing and lending into the Foodshed, everything from a farmer grower on up to a restaurant or a packaged good provider. It's a full spectrum, but it's all about getting good, clean, fair, healthy food from in the community, grown in the community, onto the tables of the community. There are other areas of impact we can think about. You could find a passion for energy, for water, but you don't find small businesses necessarily in those spaces in every community. And I think every community has a need, a desire for good, clean, healthy food, and they almost all have some sort of food production built in, whether that's only restaurants.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the questions that I've heard a lot over the time is, so you say Austin Foodshed Investors is an impact investing network, but yet you focus on food. Some people don't really see the link between food and impact, whereas personally, I think food impacts or touches on more impact vectors than really any other thing that you can. You just mentioned energy, you mentioned water, you mentioned healthcare. Food impacts all of these. One of the number one consumers of energy is agriculture. One of the number one, if not the number one consumer of water, potable water, is agriculture. Mm-hmm. If you look at the global distribution, there's a global network of distribution of food. There's so much impact built into the food system and how food is grown that I honestly feel like it's probably one of the most impactful sectors or lenses that you can look at if you want to be an impact investor.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point, and I think you also touched on something where we have a focus on Austin Foodshed Investors, but we have a focus on food in Central Texas, loosely defined as where can we drive to and back in a day, right? But we talk about global food issues. We talk about the systemic problems in food systems globally, nationally, regionally, locally. And I think that when we think about that, there are other organizations that really think about global problems and large foundations, and we're grateful they're out there doing it. And when we think about food, we really think about community and Central Texas right now. But if we can, you know, get other people
Right.
to think this same way in their communities, we'd love to support that. But what do you think about this focus of this geographic focus as a launch point?
Well, when we started up, we thought about taking either a wider lens outside of food or possibly widening our geographic space to all of Texas. And I think the way that we decided to do local and food was we figured if we could nail the model here, if we could narrow our focus enough to really get good at doing what it is we do, which is mobilizing and catalyzing in local dollars into local small food companies, then that would be easy to replicate in a nodal kind of way, rather than trying to cast too wide of a net at the beginning and lose efficiencies and kind of get hung up on all of that. We thought if we could really keep our focus and stay laser focused on local food and all of the impacts that it has from an economic standpoint, from a health standpoint, and from a food system standpoint, if we could do that here, then the way that we go about doing that, I'm not sure why it would be that difficult to go replicate in other areas once we had the ideas, the model, and the mechanisms in place to go do it.
Right, absolutely. What are you drinking there, speaking of local?
Oh, it's the official beer of Austin. It's Pearl Snap from Austin Beer Works.
Nice. I've got the Mosaic from Hops and Grain, which is also local and pretty darn tasty.
Well, cheers to local.
Cheers.